Kona is a first-person adventure mystery developed by indie Canadian team Parabole, originally released for PC back in 2016, and has since been ported to Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and now the Nintendo Switch. Dropping its episodic format for a more straightforward campaign, does Kona in fact offer a mystery worth solving, or is this eShop title better left out in the cold? The story of Kona takes place in the snowy wilderness of northern Canada, 1970. The player fills the shoes of veteran-turned-private eye Carl Faubert, who's on his way to a small community to solve a seemingly easy case for the local deep-pocketed industrialist. But upon arrival, Carl discovers that not only is his would-be employer dead, but the rest of the rural town is vacant. Now, with the paycheck being the last thing on mind, Carl must investigate the mysterious circumstances surrounding the town's disappearance and escape whatever forces may have caused the event. To do so, the player will have to traverse between the town's abandoned houses in search of helpful items and clues. Outside of a curious decision to not address why its protagonist wouldn't just leave this dangerous situation, the mostly text-based story is actually pretty engrossing stuff, that is, if you have the patience to seek it out. Kona plays out mostly like a walking sim, but has some light combat and survival elements thrown in to keep the gameplay feeling fresh. The ghost town's littered with drawers and cabinets to open, items and weapons to find, as well as lots of backstory to leaf through in the form of diaries or notes. While having plenty of things to interact within, all the houses in town were eerily similar, as if the same one family had not only lived in, but decorated, and that was a little odd. Unlike most walking sims around, the player has access to a truck to freely drive to and from the different locations on the map. Carl's truck bed also acts as a storage hub for the many items he'll find throughout the game's 6 to 8 hour campaign, and while the truck handled great for the most part, the town's narrow roads on multiple occasions had me spending far too much time trying to maneuver a 180. As Carl continues to investigate the phenomena, he'll often have to fend off bloodthirsty wolves who, in the absence of man, have reclaimed the lands. While again an appreciated alteration to the walking sim formula, the combat in Kona sadly was pretty flat. Wolves being the only real enemy to face down looked mechanic, and in early Bethesda-like fashion could be killed easily by applying some pressure in the form of awkwardly swinging a melee weapon around until the game registered a connecting hit. Slightly less clumsy are the other ways to dismiss the snow bullies. Carl can avoid the headache of melee combat altogether by simply shooting them if he's found a gun, or can even distract them by throwing a stake if the player has been thorough in searching refrigerators while looting houses. The game's other exciting form of danger is cold, forcing the player to manage Carl's inventory to always have a fire starter, matches, and log, so that he can light up a fireplace or stove to stay warm. Lighting fires also acts as the game's save system, and while at first glance was a neat take on saving, quickly became more of a frustration than anything, as the player will have to have about 2/3 of their inventory dedicated to the 3 flammable ingredients, or they're going to be constantly backtracking to Carl's truck bed to manage inventory. Ironically, it was the things the developers chose to add to the formula that ended up hurting the flow of gameplay the most. The PI work and puzzle solving are actually really enjoyable in Kona, and it was a shame that it wasn't as smooth sailing as it could have been if these added mechanics were just a little bit more thought out. Lastly, I do have to discuss Kona's somewhat infamous loading segments. Considering its content, Kona loads far too much, but that wasn't necessarily the core issue of the subject. It's the game's curious approach to not attempt to hide its loading whatsoever. Throughout time, developers have gotten increasingly more clever in hiding the load times of their games. The silhouette of a creaking door slowly opening in Resident Evil is a perfect example of this done right. There's no loading actually taking place in any area of the game, but rather when the player explores to a different area, the brilliant choice to have it loaded while a door slowly opened kept attention high and continued the suspension of disbelief as it effectively hid the idea one was playing a game.
What is it?
Blood. Jill, see if you can find any other clues. I'll be examining this. Hope this is not Chris's blood.
Whereas Kona takes the not-so-subtle approach of the actual gameplay abruptly coming to a 16-second halt as if the title had just frozen. Considering the absurdly long load time of whenever you start up the game, the fact that the map is not that large to begin with, and that there are countless opportunities to hide these moments in the many houses you'll be going in and out of throughout the campaign, these immersion-shattering moments just came off as lazy development and coated the whole experience with a feeling of being unfinished. Emotionally aware and at times excellent, the soundtrack does a great job providing an ominous tone to the unfolding mystery. Kona is also narrated throughout its campaign by a calming older gentleman, the one English voice performance acting as the bridge between player and Carl. The Raconteur's performance is mostly great, providing an exposition to the events and often putting in his 2 cents on any given situation. With that being said, moments of narration at times made me question to as if the game was QA tested. You see, Kona's gameplay is relatively text-centric, with dozens of diaries, notes, and letters to read. And for some reason, the narrator would often put in that 2 cents as soon as a document was picked up, forcing the player to at times wait upwards of a minute for him to stop talking, or somehow simultaneously comprehend the 2 separate threads of information at once, sort of like listening to an audiobook while trying to actually read a different book at the same time.
Such heart-wrenching Nordic poetry that was. But Carl didn't care much about flowery language.
Regardless of this annoyance, overall the sound design is really great and will absolutely teleport you to the snowy terrain of Quebec, particularly if you're wearing headphones. In the end, Kona was a game that was tailor-made for fans of the walking sim genre. Being a member of that particular forum, I want to be able to recommend the title, but I simply can't at its current asking price. For everything Kona attempts to change up in the trending formula, it missteps in some way, and while both atmosphere and story were immersive, by the end of the game I just felt like Carl should have threw out. I just wanted to leave. Kona is available on the Nintendo eShop for $19.99 and will take up 2.7 gigabytes of storage on your Switch.